to turn on our ovens to 180 and put the rack in the middle, okay? And I just use a regular bake setting. You could also do the ventilated if your oven does ventilated, but you might want to turn it down slightly because that generally runs a little bit hot when you do unventilated. But ventilated is sort of better if you want, like if you need to have your heat more uniform. Okay, so first thing we're gonna do is make our crust, okay? Now, I like to use a mix of regular white flour and then a little bit of whole wheat because I don't really love the taste of just plain white flour. I think it's a little too neutral, and I like the way whole wheat makes things taste a little bit more rich and rustic. You can kind of use anything you want. I would definitely use at least half of regular white flour just for the structure. I'm using 00, which means it doesn't have a lot of gluten potential. It's a very fine flour, and it's made more for things like pastries and cookies and cakes. And the idea behind that is that if we develop a lot of gluten when we make this, it's going to be very chewy. Like gluten is very stretchy and very elastic, and we don't want our crust to be chewy like and bready. We want it to be crumbly, right? So the key to that is using a flour that's not like an all-purpose flour or bread flour, something that's more pastry flour, cake flour, or in Italian it's called 00. Okay. Now I use half of this and half of integrale whole wheat because, like I said, just for a matter of personal preference and taste. So you don't have to do that. As far as quantities, now hopefully if your butter right now should be in the fridge still. Okay, we're only gonna take it out at the last minute because it needs to be very cold. All right, so now the proportion of a crust traditionally ranges from about 60% to 75% butter. And my personal preference is 60% butter because too much and it's a little bit too flaky and just over the top. A little bit less than that, and you start to get a crust that's a little bit more like an Italian torta rustica, that's more bread-like and pizza-like, or more like a tiella. So what we're going to make here is going to be 60% butter to the amount of flour that we use. Now I'm going to make mine is going to be about this size. Okay, I'm going to use a pie dish this size, and I'm going to have enough left over to make maybe one or two little ones, which I'm going to do in this. And this is a great way if you have a bunch of different leftovers and you don't want to mix them all together. You can just make little individual ones and make a bunch of different little quiches and have them at different times. Now, if you don't have something that big or you don't want to make so much, I would say go ahead and make 200 like I'm doing, just because any leftover, you can save it and you can use it another time. You could also use it and make something sweet too. Like if you have that muffin tin, you can do some savory ones, then you can also use the same one for a sweet one, because I use the same method and the same ingredients to make a pie crust as well. I just add in sugar and make a pie crust. So using a scale, I'm going to zero it out, and I'm going to do half and half. So I'm going to do 100 of this and 100 of this, okay? You guys following along? I can't really watch and do this at the same time, so interrupt and tell me if I just, and I just mix this up with my finger, okay? Now I'm going to grab my butter. And like I said, this is going to be 60%. So this was 200. So I need 120 grams of butter, okay? Now, the trick to making a good crust is that you have to use cold butter and you have to keep it cold, okay? All right, when you've got your butter weighed out, we're going to chop it up into little pieces. Like just little squares like this, okay? They don't have to be too small. Okay? And then we're going to dump all of this into the flour. Now, if you want to make a sweet pie crust, and this is the same crust that I used to make apple pie or a pumpkin pie, I would put in maybe 2 tablespoons of sugar, depending on how sweet you want it. If you're doing this all with white flour, I would use white sugar. And if I'm doing it sort of the half and half and I want it to be kind of rustic, like an apple pie, like it kind of rustic, then I would use brown sugar. If you wanted to make a crostata, more of like an Italian-style jam crostata, you would drop this amount of butter down to about 50% and add in an egg, and that'll make it more cakey. You know how crostatas are more like cakey crusts, yeah? Okay, so come in here so you can see what I'm doing here. Now the trick here is that all the recipe books say to do this to the point where it's like coarse crumbs, and actually we don't want to do it very much. I'm just pushing my fingers into the butter, just kind of squish it, and then I'm covering it with the flour, right? So I'm trying to get all of this butter squished and rubbed into the flour. But what's going to make this crust really flaky is if we don't overdo this. We actually want to leave big chunks of this. We don't want it to be all that well incorporated, because then what happens is the butter is going to melt, and that's going to create this sort of separation between the layers of flour, and that's what makes it flaky. So we only want to just sort of squeeze these and get them covered in flour so that the flour isn't, like at least enough of the flour is incorporated into butter that it's not, like if you get way in here, you can see that the flour is looking a little bit coarser, right? Like it's not as fine as it was when we started because all of it's got a little bit of contact with butter, okay?
But Steve, so tell us about, you're not a cooking teacher or a chef, but you do cooking classes, right? So tell us about those.
Yeah, so at the Beehive, we do, I mean, most of the stuff that we do that's like social activities revolve around food. So we do dinners 3 times a week. We do a pizza making class once a week and a fresh pasta making class once a week. But we make all our own bread at the Beehive. We make our own sourdough bread. We make bagels. We make croissants. And I do a lot of, a lot of things having to do with flour. So whether it's, and I cook other stuff too. But I think that one of the things that I'm more sort of fascinated with is bread making and pizza making and stuff like that, and pasta. So we teach those, and we've got a few sort of week-long teaching events planned. One that have the kibosh put on it by the virus, of course, because we've been planning it for May. But there's one in October. Hopefully, we'll still be able to do that one. We'll see what happens in the world. But the idea is to get a group of people together, a small group of people together for a week, and do all kinds of cooking things that normally you wouldn't be able to do in a class because they require a certain amount of preparation the night before, or we're making things that are not like a 1 or 2 hour activity. We're making something and then we're going to do something with what's left over later on, or we're going to start our bread the night before and then we're going to bake it the next day. And I think having a week would give us this opportunity to make all kinds of different things and also see how they come together. Because I tend to think a few days ahead of what I'm making, and that way I'm not spending more time in the kitchen. I'm just spending, like, let's say one evening when I'm making dinner, I'm also sort of making a dough that might be pizza for the next night or something like that. I don't know how well you'll be able to hear me with the water on, but if you watch, I'm just putting in like that much at first, and then I stir it and stir it and stir it, because if you put in too much water, you're going to have a big sticky mess. So what you need to do is go little by little, keep stirring, and once this comes together in one ball, I'll show you what it looks like. You want your water cold, okay? Because we don't want this butter to melt. All right, now I can see, even though you can't see it already coming together, but I can feel it with my spoon that it's got enough water in here that with my hand I can go like this and make it like one mass without it being totally sticky and watery, okay? So it's still going to be kind of crumbly on the bottom, but this will hold together. It's got enough water in it to hold together, okay? And the way you can tell is if you wipe the dough around the edge of your bowl, and it picks up all of the flour like this, so that all of those little crumbs are no longer in the bowl, then that's got enough, okay? So I'm going to cut these leeks. And if you've never done this before, what you want to do is slice almost from the end, like this, kind of cross-sectioning it. And then what you need to do is rinse all of this inside part. These are pretty clean, but when you buy these like from the market, there's all this dirt in here. So let me do both of these. Now, what do you have to fill yours?
I also have a leek, although I didn't wash that, so I'm kind of behind you again. I have leeks.
No, it's okay. I gotta wash my.
All right. Oh, yes. Okay. And then I also have, if I can find it in my fridge, I have some biatole. I don't know how we say biatole in English,
What
but
is it?
biatole, those kind of spinach-like
Ah,
things.
yeah. Chard.
Is that chard?
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
Good to know.
chard.
I have those that I washed up yesterday, so I thought
Are
washed
they
and
already cooked or just washed?
cooked.
Okay, perfect.
Bietole is chard.
Yeah. No, this would be really good. I mean, if you don't have leeks, you can also just use onions. You can also just use nothing. Like it could just be eggs and milk and cheese. Pancetta, guanciale, all that would go really well in here. Any kind of leftovers, and again, if some of the leftovers are things that don't really go together, then I would use like the muffin tin and I would make little separate ones. So let me wash these.
I've washed mine. Yeah.
Cozy.
You cut these lengthwise twice like this, then you can cut about this wide and they'll be like little quarter pieces, right? And we don't want the very dark green parts are too fibrous. Okay, and then these little bits, if you want, you can save them either for a soup or a risotto stock. It's not a bad idea to just like keep this kind of stuff in a bag in the freezer and then chuck it into something that needs more flavor. You can do this either in a pan or I'm going to use a little pot. Okay, so I like to saute this in butter if I'm going to be, if we're going to go classic French dish here. But you can do oil if you want.
Who doesn't like butter?
Right. Now, leeks don't have that much water content in them, so and they take a little bit to cook. So we need to make sure there's enough, fat in here that it doesn't stick and burn because they brown really easy. But if you're doing something like zucchini, like even the chard or stuff like that, once you salt it, it'll probably release enough liquid that it'll cook on its own without really burning or anything. So you probably don't need so much oil or so much butter. If you're using peppers though, like bell peppers, you need to cut them really small and you need to cook them quite a while because having a crunchy pepper in the middle of your quiche would probably be, I wouldn't like that. So probably best to make sure you cook that a really long time.
So I really like the way that you're giving a lot of different options for this. So one of the reasons that we talked about making quiche is finding ways to use what you have on hand. That's especially important, really all the time, to reduce food waste, especially right now when we're trying to not go out too much to get food, right? In our fridge. So it's some good options.
Definitely. I mean, this is something. So I'm salting this a bit, okay? One of the things I really hate about cookbooks is they go with this. They have this this approach to cooking that you're going to decide what you want to eat, and then you're going to look up the recipe, and you're going to need all these ingredients, and a lot of them you're only going to need a pinch or a little bit of it, and then the rest of it is not really going to make, it's not really going to be useful any other time, especially if you're cooking something that's a little bit out of what you would normally cook. So let's say you're making like a Thai curry or something like that. You're going to end up buying a bunch of stuff that's probably not part of your typical repertoire, right? So you end up spending a lot of money, buying a lot of things. You end up having a lot of extra ingredients that you don't know what to do with that maybe go bad. And I think that's the reason why a lot of people don't cook, is because after all that, it wasn't cheap, and it was a lot of effort, and it probably didn't taste, as good as if you just like ordered it out. I'm saying this more from experience what it was like in the U.S. anyway, where you could just get any kind of food anywhere. Whereas here, obviously, that's not really the same. If you want to eat like certain cuisines, you're going to have to learn how to cook them yourself. But I think the better approach is go buy what's in season, buy what's flavorful, buy what's inexpensive, also because it's in season, and then know how to do a couple different cooking techniques and then use them for anything, especially when you've got leftovers. I think it's great. You know, quiches can be made in advance. They're better when they're cold or, you know, at least lukewarm. Like they're really versatile things. If you make them in a little muffin tins, they're very portable. They can be fancy too if you want to do it like as a first course with a little bit of salad and something. It can be kind of, you know, kind of a special thing. Like there's a lot of different stuff you can do with them. So if you know how to make it, and then with the crust, you can also use it as like a pie crust for anything else. So knowing how to do this, I think, is kind of indispensable. All right, so these have to be on a not so high heat because I don't want to burn them. But we need to cook them until they get soft. Okay. Now, while this is doing that, we're going to prep our pie dish, and then I'll show you how to roll out the thing and put it in there. If you want to do it with oil, you can pour some in, and just with your hand, you can rub it around. If you want to do it with butter, you can take about, let's say, this much, and just rub it into it so that nothing sticks, right? Okay, so you want to take your dough out of the fridge and spread a little bit of flour on the counter, like this. And we want flour on the top and the bottom, okay? And what you're going to do is you're going to pound it like this, and then turn it. Now, if your butter is cold enough and you have enough flour on the thing here, it shouldn't be sticking. Once the butter starts to melt, this is going to start to stick. Okay? Now, with a little bit of flour on top, I'm just going to give it like one each way, okay? Turn it. One that way, one that way. Okay? And then I'm going to roll it onto my rolling pin like this, scooch this over here, and go like that. Okay? Let's get this. Now, this is pretty fragile, so
Okay, now,
I'm going to use that.
did you use the whole thing? Because what about if people are doing the baby ones?
Okay, so if you're doing it like this, then what's extra, I'm just going to roll into something else. So I'm going to go like this, and all this crust will become so you just need to basically pull off a piece and roll it out, and then when you stick it in the cup here, you're just going to press it in so that it's all the same thickness. Just prick it with a fork all over like this, even on the sides. And this is going to keep it that when it bakes, the air underneath it isn't going to poke up and make it swell up, okay? And then these, we have to find a place in the fridge, where they're going to go until we're ready. Okay, so we're ready to make the filling part?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I wish I could tell if it was charging or not. I can't tell.
Okay, so I like 3 eggs and an equal quantity of milk. And this varies a lot. Like I've seen traditional recipes vary from like a lot of milk to not very much. What's going to change is if you put in less milk and more eggs, or like more eggs in respect to milk, then it's going to be very eggy. And if you do it the other way around, it's going to be very white. and almost more like a custard, okay? And I don't really like it either way. I like it, my preference is 50-50, okay? I also don't like a quiche that's very high, that's like lots of filling. I like it kind of low, that's more like a tart, like an open-faced, like filled tart, okay? Now, one way to do this is you just take your dish and you put all the stuff, like let's say it was already cooked and you had leftovers, you had some potatoes and some chard and all this stuff, and you just set it into the dish, spread it around so that it's well distributed. Put in whatever cheese you want. Scamorza is really nice to put in like little cubes of scamorza or goat cheese or something like that. And then you can just pour the batter on top, right? And then you can really regulate how much of this mixture is going to be the right level so that it covers your vegetables but doesn't get so high. In this case, I know that this amount is the right amount for what I want to do. And with leeks, we really want to mix them before and then pour it in because we can't really spread the leeks out on our pie crust without destroying the pie crust. Like we won't be able to stir it or spread it around, and we'll end up having like one layer of leeks and an egg on top, right? And if we try and stir it with a fork or something when it's inside, we'll just destroy the bottom of it. So that's why I'm doing it like this. So we need 3 eggs. And I weigh them. You don't have to do this, but I weigh them because they're usually about 50 grams each. So I usually do that and then 150 of milk. But if I weigh them, then I know exactly how much it is. It's 140. So now I can do exactly 140 of milk. So this is going to be 280. You can also use cream. If you want to go like richer, you can use heavy cream. This needs to be seasoned, so we need a bit of salt, okay, and some pepper, and definitely whatever you put in the inside of your quiche has to be well seasoned. So if it's bland, you're going to have a bland quiche, okay? And now I'm going to grate in a bunch of cheese, and this is kind of the most bland supermarket Emmental that they have here. If this were done with like a proper Comté or like a really nice, Swiss cheese, it's really divine. But they don't have it here, at least not at our little grocery store. Now I'm putting in this is 135 grams. I'm probably going to put in about a third of this. So this is going to be about 40-50 grams of cheese. And you can use whatever cheese you want. Parmigiano is good. Anything that sort of melts well will be good, or even if you have big chunks of it, like I said, scamorza is good too. All right, so this all gets mixed. I'll put a little bit of the plain stuff in here for Paloma, who doesn't like leeks. You don't want to go too high because these will puff up. They have air beaten into it and they will get puffy. Okay. And then I'll put the leeks in here. I might need a little bit of extra liquid. Okay, and then this is just going to go in. Okay, I spread it out a little bit. And that's pretty low. I'm going to put it in another egg. Okay. So see here, to do this without going all the way to the bottom and ruining your crust is not that easy. I like to push this down a little bit so that there isn't this this big empty space. And I like the crust to kind of be a little bit thicker with a lip just at the top, okay? And I put a little bit of Parmigiano on top just because I like the color, I like the way it browns. So I just kind of dust it like that with a little bit of Parmigiano. Okay? And then these go in the oven. Now, another thing you can do if you have a leftover dough is just take a piece of the dough, flatten it about the same thickness, and just put it in the oven with the rest of it. And then that's a good way to be able to judge whether it's done or not, especially with like a pie, like an apple pie or something like that, where I can't see the crust on the bottom here. whether it's done or not. This on. Slide this. Okay. And this is going to take about 20 to 30 minutes. I just keep an eye on it. Actually, maybe even anywhere from 20 to 40. It really depends. Once it's brown, you can check it like the way you check a cake and see if poking it with something comes out like a toothpick, if it comes out clean. Because you want your eggs set, but they should set pretty fast. The main thing is to make sure it's not burnt and too brown, but that the crust is nice and dark. And however much whole wheat or white flour you use is going to determine how long it takes to cook. Because a white flour is going to get brown a lot faster than a whole wheat as well.